We kick off Season 3 of Cuba Cerita with our guest Dato Mohammed Hussein, also known as Dato MH, sharing his point of view of how Malaysia's history could have been very different. We can agree to disagree with his thoughts. You decide. But hey, do at least admit he has substance to his point of views.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Welcome everyone to Season 3 of Cuba Cerita. It's so good to be back. We took a couple of months off. In between that, we provided snippets of past episodes. But it's nice to be back with a fresh series of episodes in Season 3. Now, in the previous seasons, Season 1 was all about the DNA of nation builders. Season 2 was What's Your Why? Season 3, we're taking a slightly different slant. It's along the lines of What's Your Point of View? So each and every one of our guests that we invite will obviously have a point of view which we'd like to learn about and hopefully give us an alternative view of issues which we may be aware of or issues that we are actually coming to learn of. So we've got an exciting lineup of guests for Season 3 and perhaps some of them are lesser known to you, but hopefully through our uploads and editions, they'll become more familiar names to yourself. To kickstart Season 3, I decided that I'd love to invite someone who actually I know personally, both in a personal and professional capacity. He's actually the chairman of the board that I sit on, Syarikat Takaful Malaysia, and in recent times has become a renowned writer. Please join me in welcoming Dato Mohammed Hussein, or simply Dato MH. Assalamualaikum, Dato.
Wassalam. Thank you, Azman. Honor the privilege.
Thank
Just
you.
one correction though.
Yes, sir.
Bukan renowned yet, just a struggling writer.
I think struggling and renowned is relative. But from what I see in terms of the responses to your book, your recent book launches, alhamdulillah. And in fact, it's amazing for me because I may be one of a few who somehow or other in the back of my mind would love to write a book one day. And I've had friends and family who encouraged me, but somehow or other I kind of felt I don't have enough stories to share, but who knows. But Dato, coming back to you, thank you first of all. It's a privilege, and I was purposely having you in mind for our first episode. Now, Dato, quickly, you were a corporate banker, more than 30 years with Maybank. You retired at the highest levels. You then went on to an extended corporate career as chairman of so many public listed companies. You're still very influential in the corporate circles in Malaysia, and somewhere along the line you decided that, or you finally got down to putting your thoughts and your knowledge into 2 books so far, and these books have been released in recent years, Seeking a Life Balance, and more recently, How Malaysia Missed 7 Chances at Nation Building. Wow. I'm amazed. I'm an avid reader of both, and I've read them, actually more than once because I've been quite intrigued. So I hope that you don't mind. In this episode, I'd really like to tap your thoughts around some of the ideas, your point of view that you expressed in these books. Yeah, and I know some of the topics may be seen by others to be slightly off tangent, albeit controversial. Tetapi tak apalah. This is a point of view, and of course, I read both books. Both of them are backed by facts, by research, by common learnings that everyone can relate to. Yeah. Okay. So it's going to be a very candid discussion, and please, Dato, let's be open to sharing. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start with the first. Actually, this is your second book, but I kind of was more inclined to introduce this one first. How Malaysia Missed 7 Chances at Nation Building, and in this book, for the benefit of the audience, you highlight 7, how do I say, reflections of missed chances that if the country or the stakeholders of the day had thought differently, perhaps the outcome of the nation could have been slightly different. That's one. And of course, you do have some advice in terms of aspirations. Okay. So allow me to maybe pick up one first to begin with. And I like it because it's the very first opening to this book of yours. It's the period after World War II in August 1945, when the Japanese surrendered after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And if I may begin, I'd like to really just share, and I'm sure the audience in the room also, you talk about history a lot in this book. And you introduce by the opening paragraph, it's just, history is not merely an account of what really happened. It is often shaped by perspectives. And when perspectives shift, history is rewritten, usually reflecting the victor's portrayal of events. Along this journey, heroes can become villains, and villains can be transformed into heroes, leading to a distortion of history. So I'm not saying you're distorting history, but I read here this paragraph. Now it's post World War II. And in the United States of America, of course, they bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, causing mass destruction. The Japanese surrendered. And Japan surrendered based on the acceptance of the July 26, 1945 Potsdam Declaration, which outlined the Allied forces' surrender demands, included the complete disarmament of Japanese forces and the relinquishing of control over occupied territories such as Malaya, Singapore, the Philippines, Indonesia, Guam, and Hong Kong. And then you go on to highlight that Sukarno and Hatta, they took the opportunity to declare independence of Indonesia, which effectively then prevented the return of the Dutch colonists historically, and they've been an independent nation since then. In your book, you ask the same question: kenapa Malaya or the rulers did not actually take that same route, and what would have maybe been an outcome for Malaya, since if katakan Malaya merdeka or declared independence then? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Azman. Just one disclaimer first. I mentioned that I'm a struggling writer because I have a knack for writing. These two books are actually about subject matters which are outside my specialty.
That's true.
I was a banker, I was an accountant, finance. So the first book is about, the two books combined together is about politics, about history, about economics, and about religion. Mm-hmm. And yet, I'm not a historian, I'm not a trained economist, I'm not an Islamic scholar, definitely not a scholar, and definitely not a politician, thank God. So the struggle part is to make sure that despite not being these four things and wanting to write about these four things, it has credibility.
Okay.
So the struggling part was actually was validating the facts.
Okay.
Validating the facts, and thankfully, the facts are clearly accessible, thanks to internet. Also, thanks to the British knack for keeping records and making them available, even cabinet papers after a certain number of years. After the Japanese announced surrender, they were pushing for independence. And on the second day, just 2 days after, you see, the first bomb was dropped on the 6th. The second bomb was dropped on the 9th. On the 15th, Hirohito declared surrender. On the 17th, just 2 days later, in order to preempt the Dutch from returning, the Dutch did return actually, but to preempt that return, Sukarno and Hatta took the chance to declare merdeka. They were not even ready. There was no organised government, tak ada arms even. But that galvanized the nation. That galvanized the nation and projected the Indonesian spirit of defending the country and
Working
reclaiming the
hard.
country. So but kita, what did we do? I mean, it was carried over radio. We carried over radio. I would have thought that the Malaya would also take the opportunity and reclaim our land, because this is not a typical historical military victory. It was not invading army coming in,
No.
menang, pocok, bendera as declared, this is our land. There was no British around. The nearest British presence was in Goa. The
India.
nearest garrison was in Goa, 21 days sailing away. So there was we had this land, to all intents and purposes, masa tu was ours. The remaining the occupying force, Japan dah declare dah merdeka. The British tak ada. British ada pun, I mean, once the British out, it's ours lah.
Yeah.
We are not a chattel to be passed on from one country to another.
Yes.
To all intents and purposes, it was ours. So why didn't we declare merdeka? Instead, we send word to the British, please come back, as if to say, please come back and rule us. So I thought, mana dalam history this happened? So if you read history book, and don't forget, history is written by the victors. In this case, the victors were the British. The British, of course, say that if they had not come back, Malaya would have turned communists. Malaya would have turned communists. And so I did some research. How many communists were there? And there was no live coverage of where the communists were, what they were doing, how many were there. They were in the jungle, but there were sporadic attacks on certain police and Malay areas. But there were 2.5 million Malays and about 2 million Chinese in the country. And why couldn't we sort of put up a fight, at least a token fight?
But a fight against whom? It's more of putting together, or rather the leaders of the nation at that time,
Exactly.
deciding, let's ride on the same opportunity.
That's right.
And
Right. So there were three leaders. There were
Okay.
three. I mean, you're right.
Right.
Who could have declared merdeka, even if we wanted to? Of course, the obvious choice would be the Sultan, the ruler, because they were, we were feudal society. When the Japanese left, the feudals were in charge. The two rulers were in charge. They could have declared. So why didn't they? So the book went into that. Why didn't they? The second group of people would be the aristocrats. The people like even On Jaafar, Tunku Abdul Rahman, and the people of that genre who they could have declared. Why didn't they? So the book went into that as well. The third group were the nationalists. People like Ibrahim, Yaakob kan, and Muhammad Mustafa Hussein, baharu Elmi. They were the KKM, Kesatuan Melayu Muda kan, KMM. They were in fact preparing a congress just 4 days later to declare merdeka at Session Hotel. Dah keluar semua dah. That's why Mustafa Hussein said in his memoir, we were just separated by 4 days before we could have declared merdeka. But none of them did. None of them did. And so the reason they say was, of course, adalah, I think you have to read the book why they did not declare merdeka. So I question that.
And in hindsight, would it? I mean, again, I'm thinking this is in hindsight where, for example, the rulers also were very heavily influenced by the British through education, through prior administration. So maybe there was an inclination to be like administered in that proper way. I don't know, maybe compared to how the Dutch ruled their colonies, they were never known to be fair. It was more of divide and rule versus the administrative style of the British court. And
you're right.
again,
I mean, the rulers were definitely biased towards the British. They were ruled by the British before. They enjoyed a certain lifestyle and they sort of long for that lifestyle to come back. The aristocrat, on Jaafar, for example, he wanted freedom, but he felt that the Malays were not ready for Merdeka because of the wide economic disparity between the Malays and the Chinese. And he probably right. The peasant, there was no call for Merdeka because unlike Indonesia, the Dutch ruled with an iron hand. They're really quite brutal in their rule and plundering of Jakarta, whereas the British were more suave, were more gentlemanly. They blunted, but they smile, and we look upon them as, to quote, kindly teachers and and policemen. So there was no real hatred for the British to provoke the fighting. So that was why actually we didn't declare. But of course you could have speculated many ways. But one reason that would have changed had we declared was not so much to build our country at an early age, but the psyche of the Malays would have changed. The psyche of the Malays that we were prepared to fight for independence would have changed the way people look at us. We all these history books and always say we are relaxed and easygoing kind of. But if we had fought, it would have created a different psyche. And don't forget, this is after the war. We were hardened. You would hear stories about from your parents how hard the 4 years was. So the Malays were hardened by the war. So if we had to build our country, then through hard work, we would have done so. It would have changed the trajectory. Would have changed how the Malays. You would have demonstrated the Malays, but there was no NEP. No expectation
there was no
of
need for an NEP yet.
Everybody was on their own.
And it was essentially 12 years later, which eventually we still went through the route of seeking independence, of course from the British, in a peaceful way. But again, I mean, it's always in hindsight, what if it had been different, and how we as a nation would have maybe had to come even from a lower depth to really strive to rebuild ourselves in our own way. And of course, you mentioned people like the late On Jaafar. He was instrumental in terms of the politics of the time to even unite the different races through a common political party, and versus what we see today. That would
On Jaafar, over the years, he had matured. He started as a Malay nationalist, but within a few years, he matured into a more national politician. That's why he wanted to open UMNO to other races. So that would have. How that would have changed history, that UMNO would have become a multiracial party. So there was no need for race-based parties. Then we fight on the basis of assimilation. I mean, nation building would have been formed on the basis of assimilation of the races. It would not have led to race-based parties, each representing their own interests. Because if you form race-based parties, each representing their own interests, everybody will fight for their interests. So where is the nation, the common ground?
And of course, the race-based issues led to the racial riots of May 13th, 1969. Again, you touch on this in chapter 4 of this book, where you talk about there was an effort to restore order in the country through the formation of the Majlis Gerakan Negara, or the National Operations Council, which was headed by Arwah Tun Abdul Razak at that time. And yet, it was successful for its purpose, but you in your book write that actually it could have even served a greater purpose, and maybe it was prematurely ended. Tell us more.
See, why did May 13 happen? May 30 happened because the assumption that we made when we formed Malaya, the assumption that these three different races, the Malays, the Chinese, the Indians, and the others, can have very differing economic situation, and yet live happily ever after without assimilation. Merdeka was not formed on the basis of integration, assimilation, but multiracial and harmony. Where in the world does that happen? America, the so-called melting pot, they all got together. There is no special school for For the German, there's no special school. For the Italian,
Italians.
or for the Mexican, or for the Irish, there was integration. So had we started on integration, it could have taken a different turn. I mean, the migrant race, when they come to a country, of course, they had expectation of having to integrate. All we had to do was, and if we had formed on the basis of integration, they would have gone along. There was no expectation of rule. So the fact that May 30 happened was because that assumption
Was not true.
was flawed.
Yes.
Was flawed. Nation building has to be based on integration and narrowing of racial economic disparities. So May 13 was formed, NOC was formed with three objectives. One is to restore peace and order, which they did within very quickly. Two was to make sure that government business was back to normal, which they did very quickly. Third was to create harmony and mutual trust among the races. Now that was not fulfilled because that would take years.
Yes.
You want to create harmony and mutual trust. How? Has to be based on assimilation, and through a common school. It has to be based on hard work on part of every race to upgrade themselves, including the Malays. So that could only be achieved through forceful method. I mean, forceful as well as
Longer term structure.
That's right. And NOC had the powers to do it. In fact, in the report of NOC report, which was submitted in October 1969, I think, just 5 months after and riot broke up, even the report signed by Tun Abdul Razak mentioned that, if I may quote correctly, there's no question of returning to parliamentary democracy until harmony was restored and mutual trust. So they were basically, NOC was basically putting its case for a longer tenure. But inexplicably, only 15 months after that, it was dissolved.
And went back to Parliament.
Back to the Parliament, and in fact, on the very first day session of Parliament, the quarrel between the DAP, UMNO, and PPP, I think. Quarrel. So, and had we restored that, it's not just a politics. There was enough ground to because this is part of nation building. We can tell the world that we have to do this because we want to restore form a country. And many budding issues could have been nipped in the bud had we got the power that OCD. For example, the drug issue, which was just budding at that time, could have been nipped in the bud. Couldn't go after the.
So in other words, well, I think maybe there was a concern that there would be seen to be more of a dictatorship court. I mean, being essentially under rule, under forced rule.
Yeah,
and yet the same people. I mean, as in Allahyarham Tun Abdul Razak, in years later, helped to formulate the national economic policy, which essentially, if what I read from your book is the thinking was that if, for example, the National Operations Council or Majlis Gerakan Negara was allowed to prolong its existence, maybe then by implementing some of these new measures and over a longer period of time to allow them to really happen, then maybe they could have even been I'm not sure whether the NEP would actually have needed to exist in its eventual form.
The part about being dictatorial too, that was understandable. I mean, it happened in most countries when you have under martial law or military law, dictatorship happened. But in the 21 months that he held NOC, Tun Razak never displayed that dictatorial inclination.
Yes.
I mean, if he was a dictator, he would be a benevolent dictator.
Yeah.
So there was no worry about that.
Yeah.
But we wanted there were some quarters that.
Yeah.
Don't forget, we were part of Commonwealth.
Yeah.
Committed to the British style of democracy. Maybe there were some quarters that wanted to show the world that we are a very democratic country, and the Malay thinking, what will the world say? Apa dunia kata? That kind of thing.
Kan.
So maybe that was part of the thinking, not to show the world that we actually. But at what price to nation building? At what price? So we sacrificed the power that we could have developed a country based on integration, based on assimilation. One school system would have been implanted then, and that one school system would be a place for the Malay, the Chinese, and the Indian to mingle at an early age. Instead, we that led to not integration, but the further polarization. So that was, I think, one of the reasons why I say premature dissolution of the NLC. It could easily have gone on for 5 more years, but we know we can only speculate lah. Toraza apparently, my book would go more into that.
And even in your book, you also highlighted that Allahyarham passed away a couple of years later in 1976, 76. Kan? So I think we don't know. It's all with the benefit of hindsight. Kan?
I think,
Yeah. And of course, along years later, under Dr. Mahathir's rule, Chapter 6, you touch on Vision 2020. And it was a great vision at the time. How, you use the word prematurely abandoned, okay? But I have sort of a point of view, because again, it was in 1981, I was coming to an adult age, and I could, see these things happening. I did without understanding the full context of all the different strategic thrusts of Vision 2020. I think at that time it was a 30-year horizon plan, kan? And I remember distinctly even, a time capsule being buried to eventually see what would the outcome be 30 years later. But honestly, what I do feel as a Malaysian is that I don't recall there actually being milestones along the way. For example, if there were periodical milestones, maybe they were in the government, maybe I was not aware of it. Maybe it was through the various annual budgets or whatever. But perhaps there could have been more distinct milestones where there's an evaluation. What works? What perhaps is not working according to plan, and what do we now need to shift, rather than just have this Vision 2020, stick to the 30-year plan, and hopefully at the end of 30 years, it happens as what is being planned. I don't know. You had some views.
Vision 2020 was a brilliant vision, no doubt about it. A brilliant vision, not just in terms of what we want to be, which is inspirational. It got everybody excited, but it was supported by a qualification that when they formulated this, they say that in order to implement it, we must overcome 9 challenges. These 9 challenges include 1, bangsa Malaysia. In other words, assimilation, integration. 2, we want to be a scientific society. What does that mean? That means we must have a good education system. We want to be a caring society. You must have a good welfare and hospitality system. So it has got all the dependencies recognized. But what was missing? You're right. Was a proper planning, and the plan must be aligned to that mission. I have a chapter that called the importance of alignment. To me, it's not a failure of the vision itself, but implementation issue. It was not followed by a series of action that are aligned to achieving that vision. If we had been conscious about that, it would not have led to maintenance of a vernacular school. We would have. We say if you want to form Bangsa Malaysia, they must mix from beginning one school. We have to improve, of course, the standard of education. If we want to be a scientific society, we must upgrade our education system. So ada alignment. But tapi tak ada alignment, we went a different way. We changed our way of our language of learning in key subjects. When there were not enough books. If we had wanted to do that, we would have brought back the honor of teaching. We have treated our teachers with a pay scheme and terms and conditions that reflect the importance of their role in nation building. But we did not.
You didn't.
We did not. So there was no alignment. And most important, of course, we need civil service who could execute. Mahathir was brilliant, but there was a gap between him and maybe the ability of the public sector to keep up with that.
Or to understand how.
But the multimedia super corridor was a very key component of that plan.
Okay.
And had we got that right, I think a lot of our problem on education would not have happened. So, and the reason is, well, either alignment is one thing, but along the way, maybe the great doctor changed his view, or we won't know that we have to let history form his view on that. But one thing I want to emphasize, though, that there was one aspect of, we have to look at Vision 20 in the context of NEP also. Had NEP achieved its objective, the Malays would have been more prepared to take the advantage of Vision 2020.
When you say the Malays would have been more prepared, maknanya dari segi understanding of what needs to be done ke, or even getting it done?
Well, now you are touching on my chapter on unintended consequences of NEP.
Yeah.
You want me to elaborate on
Please,
that? Okay.
please.
You see, when we talk about NEP was a product of the NOC.
Yes.
NOC said to go forward to reduce the inequality, economic disparity
Yes.
between the Malays and Chinese.
Yes.
Malays then had only about 1%
Yes.
of the economy. Germany about 30, the British, the Western about 70 or maybe about that.
Yeah.
So we say the solution is to increase Malay ownership to 30.
Okay.
We say ownership. I think that's where the
Understanding.
the understanding, interpretation, and the actual plan. So we focus on ownership. But there's also a part on AP that says increase Bumiputra participation. Participation in the economic activities. Participation means what? Means the supply chain. Let me show you an example. Katakanlah, if we focus on ownership only, kita beli je lah. Beli saja share. But beli share doesn't mean, for example, you buy 30% share of a real estate company. Yang buat property development. Now, you were running UEM before. You know that building and housing,
construction.
the spin-off affect about, correct me if I'm wrong, about 100 over businesses.
Yeah.
When you plan,
Yep.
for example,
Yep.
you need architect,
Yep.
you need valuers.
Yep.
Do we have
Yep.
Malays there? Maybe architect and valuer we do. That's not an issue. When you get approval, when you want to do clearing plant, what do you need? You need excavators, you need bulldozers, you need trucks to bring the sand, but quarry. Are there Malays in the supply chain that provide that? Tak ada.
Tak ada.
When you are ready to start, you need steel, you need cement, you need stones, you need
Materials.
gravel, you need
All other building materials.
Are there
Yeah.
bumi companies to supply that? Tak ada.
Tak ada.
Except for maybe Sima in the of cement.
Yeah.
And there was at one time Perak Hanjung also, but tak ada juga. And when you finish the structure, you want to do the wiring, you want to do the M&E work, are there enough Malays in the businesses to share that business? So I can go on. And so in other words, kalau tak, these are the opportunities, building and housing, that come with building a nation. So when there are no Bumiputra presence in the supply chain, we don't benefit. We only benefit, kata in the case of rumah, we only benefit when we take over the house. That is in your hand, you're in control. But when you take over the house, still, what do? You want to furnish.
refurbish. You end up going to
cukup.
the
You dah aircon, mana ada aircon pun tak ada. You dah ada curtain pun tak ada. So we do not focus on building the supply chain,
And this
on
is
the real businesses.
This is the sustainable, equitable participation. We're not trying to just say help one race for the other, but grow the pie, equitable, sustainable opportunity, so that for the longer run there is this economic, equity lah. One would
That's
say,
right.
kan?
Sustainable is a key word. Otherwise, kalau kita agak tak ada, every recession we were the first to fail because we did not run our business in a sustainable manner.
In fact, that comes under your second part of your book where you talk about aspirations sebenarnya. What should we still be doing more in future, and what would be examples of how we could do that. Anything further about aspirations?
I'm glad you mentioned, because the book, even though the book is titled
Missed Chances.
Missed Chances, this is not about history. This book is about going forward, which is part 2. But to learn, we must learn from the past. In going forward, that's why the secondary title is Can We Learn From Them? So the seven about the missed chances is for the purpose, as reflection.
Yes.
For the purpose of learning.
Yes.
So that in going forward, we incorporate those learning. Maybe the learning for chance number 1 is that we are not prepared to take the hard route. We only want to take the easy way out.
Easy way,
Any people suffer. We always want to take the easy way out.
But I like it also, but Dato, this book, you also touch on some success stories. Felda, even Maidin. So again, it's not about trying to put down everything, but also in hindsight, again, it's a point of view. It's a reflection on what could have been. You can't really say there's a right or a wrong. But one thing I like about your book, Dato, also is that when I read it, it's not a theoretical book. It's a book that is written based on a reflection of a situation. But tell me, it must have taken a lot of time, research, knowing where to find the research, let alone putting it all together. How long does it take for you, or how long did it take for you to actually have this from the initiation all the way to final publication?
If you go by actual time, not so much by effort involved, it actually took 6 years.
6 years?
It started actually sometime before the election of 2018.
Okay.
2018, and it was actually prompted by the one IDB case.
Oh.
And there was the chapter on Sukarno did not appear then. It started with something else.
Okay.
So I wrote the book. I wrote a draft of it, and maybe I think 2 years later, I showed it to a senior member of a publication company who looked at it and say, I don't think we can publish this.
So shortly, Dato, we're going to actually screen how viewers and listeners may be able to buy both books. But before we do that, I want to come to the first book, which I'm talking about second, Seeking a Life Balance. And I noticed that you use a pseudo name. Is that the correct? Is that the correct way? Elm
Yes.
Edge.
Yeah.
Which sounds to me like MH. Yeah. But tell me, why does your other book have your name Mohammed Hussein and this one has got Elm Edge?
I spent 31 years in banking. When I left my bank, that's it. I'm done with banking. I want to move into other things.
Okay.
But if I were to write a book, everybody would assume that I would be writing a book about myself or about banking. So if I were to use my own name, it would give the impression. So I thought, okay, since I'm known as MH anyway, might as well.
Quite a name.
Quite a name, but stylize it a bit. MH.
MH.
Lagi pula, if I write my own name, Muhammad Hussein, if people Google up, you see about 30,000 Muhammad Hussein. Most of them in Rhodesia, in
Which you want to choose?
So MH, tak ramai sangat lah.
But I love this book also. It's, the narrative, the references.
I'm actually more proud of this book.
I certainly. And again, you're writing it from your heart. But it's a lot of references to verses from the Quran, references from the Hadith yang sahih, and it's very educational and enlightening. And also reading this book gives me a feel of the personal side of yourself more so than even this book, because I feel that you're writing it really from the heart, from your heart. I know there's a lot also in this book, and I'm maybe going to touch on 2 parts, if I may, if we have time, and if there's an opportunity, you can even, because you touch about there's 7 personal applications of around work ethics that you can apply. So for readers who get a hold of this book, there's a lot to read into it and understand the basis of your insights. But I want to maybe pick up 2 for starters, if we have time, one of them is in chapter 4, where you talk about managing your personal finances. And I'm going to refer to the page on page 127 of your book, where you write that actually, though you're an accountant by training, exposed to financial management with large corporations over a 45-year period, the biggest influence in my life in managing finance was learned during the 5 years I spent working for my late father, assisting him to run a small import-export business in a small town. Can you share something about this insight and this reflection of your father?
You see, but I learned more from my father after he passed away, right? From stories about him, from my father, from my brother who took over my place and ran the business. What I learned from him in running a business is financial discipline. You see, he doesn't have the comfort of corporates or banks with large banking lines or interbank lines. So he had to manage the cash, prudent. So he always worried whether there's enough cash to pay for the suppliers, enough cash to pay for he tak borrow money, so he doesn't need money to pay banks, but only bills of lading, only the letters of credit when they arrive, he had to pay cash. So he for the imports lah. So he never borrowed a single cent. He always believed that he a strong believer in riba lah, whether you are on the paying side or on the receiving side. His money is all kept on current account. So I learned about the financial discipline. So that's where that's how important it is to financial discipline. And financial discipline, if you cannot manage well, it can break up your life. Marriages, for example, many break down if you study, not because of the love is gone but financial struggle. I projected I needed only 3,500 a month.
Seriously, yeah?
To retire. It was in 1985. But over the years, I had to revise it at least 10 or 20 times. Because satu, I didn't provide, like most Malays, I didn't save enough for education. I assumed the education would be
provided for
by the government through loan or scholarship. Marriage. I assume marriage. I forgot totally about marriage. In fact, EPF report pun showed that many retirees, 1/3 of the pay is gone on either on bad investment or marriage. See, marriage Melayu bukan macam marriage Chinese. A Chinese marriage pay for themselves. A Chinese go to a marriage, dia tengok tempat ni berapa satu orang, dia bagi 200. They pay for their own food. Melayu you bagi Queen Anne lah, bagi striker, tak bagi cash. Only lately now that habit has changed. So itulah, so I started to save for that. But also, I forgot that the cost of living has gone up. That I thought that I would have no more responsibility for your children. But maybe you have to help out your children in the early stages of marriage when they have children. Your grandson. Sekarang, even kindergarten cost ribu sebulan. Kindergarten. What more if you have to able to...
long into our retirement, we still have to consider.
So that's why I'm still a struggling writer. I try to make it look. But so the importance of personal saving is underestimating you. Sorry, I also forgot that when you retire, your expenses do not go down. Nowadays, because of life expectancy, when you retire, you're still young. You still want to do things that you cannot do and still have enough energy to do them after you retire. So chances are, actually, I spend more after retirement than time for the first 5 years. After that, you wind down, you slow down, you get more religious, you don't.
But the children's demands remain.
So, economic book we learn about saving equal investment. But my only advice on personal investment is save early. There's no. I mean, critically evaluate the lifestyle that you want to live.
But it requires a lot of discipline. And again, fine. The words that you use or the advice that you give is not uncommon from other financial management books. You must work to earn income to begin with the halal way. Know your financial capacity, manage your expenses. If you need to borrow, do so at a level that you can meet your financial commitments. Save and invest for the future. If, for example, even owning a car is actually going to be an inconvenience, reconsider it. So these are all practical tips and advice. Doable, yeah. Even I think in future, the concept of even buying homes will no longer exist. People will just maybe continue to rent long term because it becomes an operational cost rather than a capital outlay.
Asset lifestyle.
Yeah. But again, I think the way that you write it, and I hope that the readers can read it up and look at it in the perspective of someone who is putting it in a way that's practical and makes sense. And of course, there are so many more parts to this book. I want to maybe move on to the part where you call work ethic number 7. You must have peace between the ears. And I'm going to read the paragraph, if I may, on page 139. It says, "It's something I realized along the way that without this 7th element, no matter how good you are in the other 6 items, you get the feeling that something is missing." So 2 questions I have is, of course, tell us what you mean by peace between the ears, and in reflection, at which particular point in your own personal life did you realize this particular ethic or element?
It is an expression of something that I have always believed, that we must live a balanced life.
Okay.
Earlier on, the concept of balanced life was very much your work life and your family life and your personal life. That's balanced life. Because we, Maybank, for example, we work maybe 12, 14 hours a day. So you can only do that if you have a balanced lifestyle, that you have time for yourself to relax. So I expanded it into a different concept of balance. Balance between dunia and akhirat. One of the things my father always used to say was that, let me share this with you. As Muslim, as children, we always pray behind our father, kan? Bila our father doa, kita angkat doa lah. But I never knew what that doa was. I think one day after my father passed away, I asked my mother, "Ayah, you know why I speak Kelantan lah, kan? Gapo ke ayah doa ni? What does he pray? He asked for?" And my father said 5 things. Satu, lekat iman. I mean, you are steadfast in your faith. Mati dalam iman, kan? 2, he never asked for long life. My father believed that when we are born, mereka dah bisik dah bila exact moment. And there's a verse in the Quran that says God will not extend that even by 1 second. Time comes. So, but he asked for a healthy life, kesihatan yang sepanjang hayat. Health sepanjang hayat. Hayat tu tak payah renegotiate, dah determined dah, but ask for good health. There's no point having a long life by spending the last 20 years in bed.
True.
So it's not so much the number of years, but rather the years of your life. I mean, the life in your years, not the years of your life, but the life in your years.
Life in your years.
So sehat sepanjang hayat. 3 4 part is he never asked to be rich, but he said harta, meaning harta yang halal dan berkat. Halal dan berkat. Kalau harta tak berkat, it doesn't last very long. Harta berkat tak cukup pun. There's a Syrian poet which I quote in under keberkatan, seeking for keberkatan in life. You may want to
yes.
That. And 5, of course, jauhkan family daripada itulah. So when I read the Quran, started reading the Quran, there are many verses that support that. This is, and I translate that into peace between the ears and you, because you mentioned about seven rules that are followed, like be good in your work, managing your personal finance, about getting along well with others, maintaining healthy body that require healthy mind, healthy body. 5, seeking life balance lah,
Yes.
plus of course dia dah.
Yes.
Now, when you is that part of it is more about seeking success in this world, but not forgetting your share in the
Hereafter.
on this world.
Yes.
And I was prompted by that by verse, I think ayat 77 dalam surah 22 Al-Qasas.
Al-Qasas.
Al-Qasas. Dengan apa yang aku bagi kepada kamu, buatlah rumah di akhirat, tapi jangan lupa bahagian kamu di dunia.
Yeah.
With what I've given you, build a house in the hereafter. Mana go to heaven lah. But do not forget your share in this world. And you see that theme prevailing in quite a few verses. Ada getting our share in this world. What is our share in this world? In Surah Ar-Rahmah, for example, Ar-Rahmah, there were 69 verses, I think. Allah mentioned about the berkat, what He gave to the world. I created this world just for you. And after every berkat, every berkatan, He asked a question. Fabi ayalah ya rabbukum tukazibah. Dan apa lagi nikmat yang kamu mahu dah. So in other words, do all that, but don't forget. Share this world within the constraint that I have created for you. Ar-Rahman Aziz actually translate that phrase Fabi ayalah rabbukum tukazibah in a very nice Kelantan translate. Dia kata, mung tak payah lagi. You still don't get it, is it?
Yeah.
The 31 times Allah mentioned, is it?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think we can spend hours on end, deciphering each and every part of these books. But in the interest of time, Dato, we have to bring this episode to a close. And I'm glad it's the opening episode because it's really a lot of sharings and reflections on your point of view, all substantiated. Let's first of all thank you. But I also want to thank the audience also for tuning in to watch this. And here's a special offering. What we're going to do is we're going to offer these books to be bought online, and we're screening the link to order these books. You can order both of them online. And in the interest of this episode and also Cuba Cerita's sponsorship of Dato's work, we want to offer a 10% discount to those who buy using the discount coupon, which we will screen onto for you to see. And so when you buy these books online, they'll enjoy a special discount courtesy of Cuba Cerita and in support of your work, Dato. And thank you so much. I know this is not going to be the end. I'm sure there's a third book or an updated version of these editions in the writing. So we look forward to hearing more from you, Dato. And thank you once again for sharing. Any final words, Dato, you may have?
I hope you'll find some manfaat lah in reading these books there, in your personal life as well as working life.
Yeah.
So that we seek that balance.
Yeah. And this is part of your amalan jariah. InsyaAllah berkat to you and your family, Datin and the family, Alhamdulillah, rezeki Datuk lah for being able to do such fine work. Thank you once again, Datuk, for joining us. Obviously, I see you every now and then, so it's even more pleasurable to have our conversations in private. But, I really thank you for spending time with us, and, we look forward to your good health. Our best regards to Datin and the family.
Pleasure.
Yeah? Okay. So, thank you for joining us. It's sessions like this that we feel that are so beneficial to everyone who watches. This season, also, I must allude to you that we're going to try to improve on terms of how we deliver these episodes. So look forward to also receiving or seeing, summary episodes where we even combine points of views of our various guests that may have a common theme. So this will hopefully enlighten you, viewers and listeners. And, we hope that you continue to support us. For those of you who have still not subscribed to our YouTube channel, nothing helps but even more with that support. So please do so. Share this with your friends and your colleagues, as well as those who are interested to listen to us on Spotify. So, till our next episode, thank you once again for joining us. We wish you well, and inshallah, we hope to see you again soon. Assalamualaikum. Have a good day. Have a good week ahead, everyone.